Equinox. Today's presentation, Love of Volcanoes in the Andes. The sun, we believe. In the sun because it brings us light every day. The same light which allows us to see where we're going. And makes our plants grow and gives us heat. But the sun is the owner of fire. When he's mad, his fire emerges from the mouths of the volcanoes. We, the sun's children, fear him and respect him. From the volcano's womb we come, and to its womb we will return. Great Mother Earth is called Pachamama. From her, the Kitukara people were born. It was a matriarchal culture. Priestesses celebrated their rituals from the pyramid summits. There, they would sacrifice llamas to quiet down the volcano's fury. Kitu is translated as land of the center or the middle. Ancestors knew they were occupying the middle of the world. From the pyramids, they would observe the planets, and the volcanoes were their main reference. Strange warriors came from the south. They would call themselves Cusqueños. And they brought with them new ways of working the land and building. They also knew about the planets. Some resisted them, and others accepted them. But in time, they spoke the same language. The same sun reigned under a different sky. Ecuador, land of volcanoes, made up of a long chain of craters and restful valleys. Volcanoes in long lines, accumulating the young soil to allow for the planting of cornfields. A copy of gold. Volcanoes with a human pulse, fiery and impetuous lovers, progenitors of the solar men. Love is made of joy and virtue, of jealousy and possession too. The fathers and mothers feel the same. The elders tell us that Chimborazo was married to the beautiful and young Tungurahua. One day, he found out that the volcano Coyay had a love affair with his wife. A wild struggle between the two men started. contemplated the fight. Coyay defended his feelings. Chimborazo won, and until today, Coyay shows the wounds that the fight left. She rejoiced in the midst of silence. But both men exhausted their fire, perhaps forever. Father Chimborazo will always be the great father. This is the way his children were born. A piece of the sun fell from the sky and introduced itself into Mother Earth's womb in the shape of a flashing rainbow. From Earth, man was born, the Chimbo man. When the sun shines above, it brings fertility to the sown land. But Supay the demon could have entered. Then men leave their huts and scare away the spell before sowing. Some men disguise themselves as warmis or women, which help to take out the Supay. Is invited to bless the land with his holy water.
Yapak, Churipak, Yusumak, Utipi, Jasnakachu. Yapak, Churipak, Yustipi.
There is no better moment than a feast for courting. Men also wish the fertility of their women by throwing corn dust at them to assure their womb's fruitfulness. The fertility ceremony ends with a brief mass.
Tayta Dios tapaginapaq tanakushkanchi. Tayta Dios kallpa mamamanta karashka muyukunata. Chaymanta yupaychanapaq. Tayta Dios tapagininapaq. Kay granukunata wiñi pachapaq Tayta Dios karanukunata. Chinanishpa Tayta Dios tamayanchi kayta bendiciachu. Diosiyapaq churipaq sumaq samaq pishtipi chasnakachu. Sumaq tanto pishtipi chasnanishpa bendiciane. Diosiyapaq churipaq samaq pishtipi chasnakachu. Nirati kankunata Tayta Dios bendicikachu. Diosiyapaq churipaq sumaq shutipi chasnakachu. Tukuy kaypi tanakushka Tayta mamakuna ayllachu kapankichik. Kunan tanakushkanchik.
The day begins and magnificent men prepare themselves for a visit to Father Chimborazo. When the fire ceased and Chimborazo calmed his impetuous spirit, the ice surrounded the volcano in a glacial embrace. Timidly, the Chimbo men came closer to look at the ice. They discovered its freshness and asked him permission to take it home. Meanwhile, way down in the town in the warm valley, a young girl is getting dressed as a bride. It is the godmother's obligation to lead the bride to church. The guests and the priest accompany the bridegroom, and everybody waits anxiously in front of the altar.
Kunanka kaya punchikpaq wawakunata sawarchingapaqmi kaypi kanchik. Apunchik yaya kunan tingichiskataka runakunaka ama paskangachu. Apunchik yayapaq aychata.
Towards the end of the ceremony, the newlyweds receive the body of Christ.
Kasilia rina usana kungichikni.
The first ones to bless the newlyweds are the wedding's godparents.
Bendición tacubrine, bendición del Padre, del Espíritu Santo, sufra para Dios. Atarecho hijo.
Boripanga allita con su pan y guava, allita porengue yo bendición de Dios. Ya buenos días. Buenos
From the freezing glacier heights arrive the icemen to refresh the feast. They bring with them the ice, which was water 3 million years ago. With it, they prepare the traditional raspado. The raspado is the mixture of glacier ice and fruit juice. Whether taking a piece of the mountain or the bread and the wine of the Holy Communion, it is only the manner that changes. The essence is the same. The wedding's godfather performed his duty. He takes the newlyweds to an abandoned house. The house contains only one piece of furniture. The bed. The godfather leaves them there without any clothes. He returns to the feast with their clothes as a trophy. He is Father Imbabura, husband of the young Maria Isabel of the snows, Cotacachi. She had a secret relationship with a young Mojanda. The jealous man assigned a duel to their respective Chusalongos, the mountain spirits who used their huge male organs as levers to move gigantic rocks, which can still be seen today. The young Mojanda won this cosmic combat by throwing the rocks further away, and until today, he possesses the old gray-haired Cotacachi. Each mountain hides a Chusalongo on its lap. One afternoon, a young shepherdess went up the slopes looking for her lost sheep. Night was near. The mountain's magic and enchantment sheltered her. This is when Chusalongo appears, and with his well-known seductive talents, overcomes her resistance. This is why it is not uncommon in towns and villages to find pregnant young girls from unknown fathers. Parents will later explain it was Chusalongo. Somewhere in the mountain, there was a lake that had a bad temper. When he got mad with men, he would eat them. But he admired beautiful women. Once, an innocent maiden went by and started a conversation with the lake. He quickly fell madly in love with her. I will give you all of my riches if you enter my waters and agree to live with me as my wife. And that is what happened. But as soon as a beautiful golden necklace was placed around her neck, the maiden abandoned the lake, leaving him sad forever. People from big cities know more about the fury than the love of volcanoes. The Pichincha volcano menaced Quito with a terrible earthquake. A saint offered herself to the volcano to calm his fury. Pichincha accepted the life of the saint as an offering. And kept its promise. This is how Quito saved itself from later earthquakes, thanks to Mariana de Jesus. One of the most interesting chapters of volcanoes' history occurred last century. It started with the arrival of the famous British mountain climber Edward Whymper, who arrived on December 9, 1879. He considered Chimborazo his first challenge. He started ascending it on December 26 from Guaranda, accompanied by the Correll cousins who came with him from Italy. Some people helped carry the heavy load, but later deserted fearing the volcano's rage. Fortunately, their optimism was always greater than the inconvenience. In Guaranda, suspicion spread among the natives. I found that they knew more about my intentions than myself. Sir, to climb Chimborazo it's impossible. We know that you're looking for buried treasures. When you discover them, don't forget about us. Gentlemen, it will be my pleasure to share half of the treasure if you share with me half of the expedition's cost. He organized his third camp next to some very sharp peaks, which until today carry his name, Whymper's Needles. His love for photography drove him to bring from England one of the most modern cameras that was available at that time. His best photographs later became beautiful etchings. Climbing mountains requires one to be in an excellent physical condition, but more important still is the spiritual strength to succeed. Whymper was able to skillfully achieve both. The fulfillment of his dream is coming near. Now he hopes to conquer the peak, but the weather seems to be his enemy. In spite of all the inconveniences, he reaches the summit and obtains the first measurements in history of the immense Chimborazo. With the last daylight rays, he starts the descent. He has reached the top, but it is a sad success due to the adverse conditions of his conquest. Whymper was widely known for his conquest of the Alps. At that time, the British government was getting ready to invade Tibet. Because of this, he was commissioned to study the effects of low blood pressure in the human body at high altitudes. He decided to investigate this in the Ecuadorian Andes. There, he crowned 11 summits in the Avenue of the Volcanoes, 8 of which had never been reached. He brought with him a variety of modern measuring instruments. The mercurial barometer and the aneroid are the ones that he jointly used to prove his measurements. He managed to precisely measure the heights of the Ecuadorian Andes. Cutting one step after the other, and thus step by step, climbing the slope, was a painful way to conquer the heights at the time. Not all of Whymper's ascensions ended up successfully. There were painful defeats, but always due to the unpredictable weather in the Andes, never due to the lack of courage of these expeditionsmen. When narrating one of the accidents which had occurred, he comments with British humor, "My companions pulled from both sides, but in vain. When they finally got on the same side, they managed to pull me out. The only inconvenience of that incident was that I lost my cap." Whymper made his way up to Antisana on March 4th. After a whole day of seeing no one, he met an unusual character. A very elegant gentleman and splendid horse rider. He seemed to have been born on a horse. He was the owner of the hacienda, which welcomed Whymper at the bottom of the snow-capped mountain. The beauty of Hato Antisanilla captivated Whymper as much as the courtesy and generosity of his host. Cotopaxi, the highest active volcano of the planet. I have waited for this moment for so long that I saw this volcano approaching hastily. February 18th, 1880. The crater never before seen by any human was right there in front of us. Almost 20,000 feet high and 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Who would imagine that this peaceful crater would erupt furiously just a few weeks later? Natives who accompanied us to Cotopaxi later reported their experience in a machachi tavern like this. The doctor, dressed as king, was going from one place to another looking at the floor, but a while later Mr. Juan and Mr. Luis got scared of him and tied him up to a rope. Did they find the treasure? We think so. They were on their knees looking for it. We don't know if it was gold, but it was very heavy. If for many expeditionists the legendary gold was a temptation, for Whymper to take care of the Inca vestige was much more exciting. For a well-educated European, investigating a pre-Columbian culture had a more exotic and intriguing tint to it. In the beginning, he was not able to explain what he was looking for, but unexpected circumstances took him to some objects of curious origin. He obtained them with certain ease, because their owners ignored their real value. Later, he would scrupulously classify his collection. When I sent objects to the port of Guayaquil, the royal path was in such bad condition that the mules with their entire load fell into the cliff. This is why I understood that glass brought from foreign lands was so expensive in Quito. On June 16th, I woke up in Penipe, in the house of the political chief, who was also the tailor. he fixed trousers and administered justice alternately. My host had advised me about the existence of fleas. The Collanes Valley takes them to the Collay Mountains, known today as the Altar. At the valley's entry, they decided to camp. We crossed the valley guided by a humble man who was the owner of at least 300 square miles. He offered us the land in exchange for nickels. My assistant Karel immediately bought the whole valley. This is when I decided to buy the altar. Oh no, that's not for sale. Why don't you want to sell the mountain? Well, because that's where the treasures are. The following days, the altar sheltered the expeditionaries among the sullen peaks. his return from the altar, he looked for shelter in the small town of Machachi. On arriving at an inn, he was more precautious and asked,
Déjeme que le ayude, señor. Déjeme que le ayude.
Sir, by your word of honor, are there any fleas in this house? By my word of honor, sir, yes, there are. His passion for science took him to investigate further from his goal. During the entire trip, he collected innumerable quantities of insects, which he carefully classified, many of these unknown at that time. During his last days in Ecuador, he collected a very peculiar insect sample in Guayaquil, which he recalled having gathered in one night in his hotel. Without being a botanist, and mountain climbing being his real interest, he reached an important conclusion. The intimate relationship between height and temperature necessary for the existence of certain plants. He was specially interested in moss and lichen. These samples and another large collection of high-altitude plants are being kept at the British Museum in London. The long expedition in Ecuador was exhausting. The very few times he decided to rest, he stayed in the hacienda that he called the Inca's house. The British was a solitary man all his life, but at age 66, he married a young 20-year-old woman who gave him a daughter who later followed in his footsteps as an alpinist. On July 1st, 1880, his mission had concluded. But there was still one empty space to fill in. He wanted to return to Chimborazo. Chimborazo was considered the highest point in the planet. For Whymper, his glory was the certainty of knowing that he had reached the summit of the world. In the descent, the magic of Chimborazo possessed him. Humbled, he couldn't avoid thinking about his predecessors. They were there, Alexander von Humboldt. They had their differences, but there he was, as a spectrum. America's liberator, Bolivar, whom Chimborazo left delirious. In this house, in the town of Riobamba, Bolivar wrote his famous Chimborazo's Delirium. Was always accompanied by the spirit of the well-known Manuela Sáenz. Observe, learn, keep in your mind what you have seen. Sketch for the eyes of your fellow man the image of the universe.